Yeah, I mean, you always want to have some blowouts. You want to be a little calmer in the fourth quarter. But I've always said it can be a good thing as you get to the playoffs and later in the season. Just knowing that you've been in those moments before, and knowing how to kind of attack it, play by play, not making it too big of a moment. But no, I mean, I would say this more than anybody. I would love to win a game, not by the very last play.
Weekend Warriors. That was Patrick Mahomes, who completed 27 to 37, 269 yards and 3 touchdowns. Matthew, most notable thing to me, 5 rushes for 60 yards in this one.
Yeah, he keeps using his legs as a season high in fantasy points and rushing yards. He now has 3 touchdown passes in 3 of the past 4 games, which is nice. Raiders and Chargers next up for Mahomes, who's back to being a QB1. Good to see.
Noah Gray also catches 4 targets, 66 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Unbelievable Noah Gray in this offense right now. Josh Jacobs, Jay, also makes Weekend Warriors volume for Josh Jacobs. 26 carries, over 100 yards. 3 touchdowns helps too.
He had 19 carries in the first half. Like, this is what Matt LaFleur wants to do. He wants to run the ball and then he wants to take deep shots, which is kind of bad news for fantasy purposes for the Packers wide receivers, but great news for Josh Jacobs. He's quietly been having a very solid year, just hasn't been getting the touchdowns until yesterday, where he had 3 of them to make up for lost time. So he is running back 2 going into Monday Night Football.
6 rushing touchdowns in the past 4 games, at least 20 or more fantasy points in 4 of the past 5. Just something to watch out for, as you can see the workload getting a little bit less because he had such a big workload here, and they play the Thursday night game at home against Miami, which has a pretty good run defense.
RB2 for Jacobs right behind him. RB3, Bucky Irving, Matthew. Big volume, but a little bit different. 6 catches, 64 yards, 12 carries, 87 yards. He gets the touchdown. Massive day for the Bucs that the Giants got booed out of the stadium.
Honestly, should have had an even bigger day because he gets down at the 1-yard line and then they bring in Sean Tucker on one of the early drives as well. So it could have been even bigger. But the most fantasy points by a rookie running back in a game this season. He's now quietly had at least 15 fantasy points in 5 of the last 6. Season high in touches, scrimmage yards, and target share. Bucky Irving is out, and it's not getting put back into the bottle. You'll still see some Rachaad White and Sean Tucker, but he's officially overtaken this backfield, and he's a top 20 running back the rest of the way. Love me some Bucky Irving. Nice try, Pete, trying to steal him for me from Zach Charbonnet. We have backup producer Pete. Stop it.
Cortland Sutton with the big day, Jay, as the Broncos offense continues to roll. He caught 8 of 10 targets, 97 yards, 2 touchdowns, the best fantasy game of his career.
Indeed. Since week 8, he leads the NFL in receiving yards. He's been the big beneficiary of Bo Nix taking this leap, and this offense is just rolling at the moment. So I don't think it's going to sustain at this level. They have a tougher matchup against Cleveland on Monday Night Football next week. But Cortland Sutton, I mean, he's someone you can start with confidence at the moment because of how Bo Nix is playing.
Jacoby Myers also with a big day, 15 targets, catches 10 of them, 121 yards. Matthew, I mean, there's not a lot in this offense. Brock Bowers and Jacoby Myers is where it's funneled through.
For sure. I think his first game back last week, we were just like, it was such a huge Brock Bowers game. People were like, is Jacoby Myers going to get that crazy target share that we sort of expected under the Turners, who were calling the plays here? And yes, indeed, 15 targets, 10 receptions for 121 yards. His 33% target share was the 4th highest among wide receivers this past week as well. Very quietly in 5 of the last 6 games, he now has a 25% target share. Worth noting, though, it's going to be Desmond Ridder throwing him the ball, which is a little...
That's a drop-off.
Before you start complaining about Gardner Minshew, you didn't know how good you had it with Gardner Minshew. Maybe AOC gets back, but at the moment, it looks like Desmond Ridder will be under center for the Raiders. But still, great to see that target share for Jacoby Myers, who's always been talented when he gets the work.
Trey Tucker also with 8 targets in that game for the Raiders. Our final weekend warrior, Jay, Trey McBride. He gets 15 targets, catches 12 of them, 133 yards. Not a great day for Arizona, but a big day for McBride. Tight end 1 going into Monday Night Football.
Very strange day for Arizona's offense. Felt like Kyler Murray couldn't get anything going outside of going to Trey McBride. He hits career highs in targets, receptions, and receiving yards. He now leads all tight ends with a 28% target share this season. So Trey McBride, just fire him up. Clear tight end, top 5 tight end.
What's crazy is how good his fantasy season's been. He hasn't scored a touchdown this year.
Yeah.
He hasn't scored a touchdown this year. Kyler Murray actually had him wide open in the end zone and just overthrew him.
Yeah.
So could have gotten his first touchdown of the season. But obviously McBride, after such a brutal start to the season for all fantasy tight ends, McBride, who went like 3 or 4 in almost every draft this year, starting to produce. By the way, when I talked about how down bad I am, I forgot to mention, my ride or die is dying. I had him as QB3 this week. He should have gone off. He was missing throws, bad pick as well. Awful. God.
It's good to get it all out.
God, Kyler Murray, what are you doing to me?
Sunday Scaries.
Headlined by whatever the hell that was.
We'll get to Arizona in just a moment, but we start with Jonathan Taylor here, Matthew. 11 carries, 35 yards. Here's Taylor's worst fantasy performances.
Yeah, and second fewest fantasy points in a healthy game in his career for a friend of the podcast, Jonathan Taylor. Season low in touches and rushing yards. Just a bad day at the office against a tough matchup. I'm not worried about it. Ultimately, the fact that Anthony Richardson is running and everything like that, better days are ahead for Jonathan Taylor. But quietly under single-digit fantasy points in 3 of the past 4 games. More RB2 than RB1 until the Colts start getting a little bit better at running the ball.
Hopefully better days ahead for Deebo Samuel, Jay, but honestly, with the way the season's gone, not a lot of reason to believe right now. He gets 4 targets, he catches one of them for 21 yards. It's not happening for Deebo.
It's not happening for Deebo. Even when Brock Purdy's been in there,
Right.
It hasn't really been happening for Deebo. He only had a 15% target share. Now we got Brandon Allen a little bit, so you have to throw it out somewhat, but at the same time, he just hasn't really lived up to
He
expectations.
made some bad drops. Like,
Yeah, he doesn't look like
that
the same
interception,
guy.
I feel like, was on Deebo, not on Brandon Allen.
Yep. Tough game for Deebo. Tough season for Deebo.
A tough game for Marvin Harrison Jr. in that Arizona
Since week 3,
offense.
by the way, he has 1 game with 13 fantasy points. Is Deebo still an automatic fantasy starter with
I don't think
everyone
so. No.
healthy?
If Brandon Allen starts again next week, I would say no.
No, definitely not.
And we'll have
Especially
more.
on the road at Buffalo.
Yeah. Not an easy place to play this time of year.
No, it is not.
Marvin Harrison Jr., Matthew, he gets 6 targets, but only 3 of them for 47 yards. As this passing offense sinks, he sinks with it.
Yeah, he had a play where he got 1 foot in and then kicked over the pylon, and I think dangerously close. I think if that's a touchdown, I think the day looks a lot different. Just again, credit Seattle. They played the Cardinals tough. Kyler had a bad day at the office. Better days are ahead for Marvin Harrison Jr., but he's now had under 8 fantasy points in 4 of his last 6 healthy games. He's a boom-bust wide receiver 3. Clearly, Trey McBride is the only guy that you feel super confident about in that Cardinals passing attack. Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and RotoWorld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest RotoWorld fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.